When you close your eyes and picture a steam engine, you hear a rhythm. Chug, chug, chug. That is the sound of pistons fighting for every inch of track. But in 1944, the Pennsylvania Railroad built a machine that had no rhythm. It had no chug. It was the S2 turbine. And at 100 miles per hour, it did not sound like a train. It sounded like a fighter jet. This was not a normal locomotive. It had no pistons. Under its skin, it hid a direct-drive steam turbine, the same engine used in a World War II battleship, shrunk down and bolted to a train frame. It was the smoothest, fastest, and most advanced steam engine ever built. But it had a fatal flaw. While it was a miracle at high speeds, at low speeds, it was a disaster. It destroyed its own boiler. It shattered its own gearbox. And after just one prototype, the most futuristic train in American history was quietly scrapped. How did the Concorde of steam go from the future of transportation to a pile of junk in less than 5 years? Diesel electrics were flooding the market like a new breed of predator, and every railroad man could feel the pressure in his bones. By 1944, steam power was no longer the king of American rails. General Motors and their electromotive division were churning out sleek, boxy diesels by the hundreds. These machines did not need water stops, did not belch smoke, and did not hammer themselves to pieces after every run. On the Pennsylvania Railroad, the old guard watched as switchyards filled with EMD units. Wartime restrictions meant steam engines could not even get the alloys they needed, and diesels rolled out with modern parts, ready for endless miles. The numbers were brutal. Only a fraction of new locomotives were steam, and every month another chunk of the fleet went diesel. For a chief engineer obsessed with horsepower and pride, it felt like a siege. The only answer was to fight back with something the diesels could not match, a machine so advanced, so strange, it would make the diesel surge look like a passing fad. The board signed off on a single, monstrous prototype. There would be no production run. Just one shot, one 500-ton gamble. Wartime rationing meant the alloys we needed were locked away, so we bolted on more steel, pushing the mass past anything steam had ever rolled on American rails. That is how we ended up with the only 686 wheel arrangement the world had ever seen, a battleship's stance, not a locomotive's. I remember standing in the drafting room, tracing the outline of that direct drive turbine, vowing that if the diesels wanted a fight, we would give them a machine so advanced it would make their gears shudder. The War Production Board's limits forced our hand, but they also set us free to build something no one else dared. From the first stroke of the pen, the S2 was destined to be a lone giant, a test pilot's dream, and a railroad accountant's nightmare. The heart of the S2 was a turbine spun straight from the dreams of marine engineers. No pistons, no pounding rods, just a single shaft, roaring at 9,000 revolutions per minute. Westinghouse built her turbine like a scaled-down battleship engine, and the numbers still make my hands sweat. 6,900 horsepower, delivered direct to the driving wheels through a reduction gearbox the size of a small sedan. There is no generator humming in the belly, no electric motors like the C and O M1. This was pure mechanical audacity, a direct drive monster, all torque and velocity, with nothing between the spinning turbine blades and the rails but a wall of gears and oil. Stand next to her, and you will not see the familiar tangle of piston rods. The S2 wears her power naked. Instead of the old hammer and anvil rhythm, she offers a continuous, frictionless surge, smooth as a scalpel slicing through steel. The turbine's high-pitched whine drowns out the world at speed, a sound more at home on an airfield than a rail yard. At full power, the reduction gears translate those 9,000 screaming revolutions per minute down to just a few hundred at the wheels, side rods flinging power to all 8 drivers. Efficiency at speed, 97%. The whole machine is a study in rotary obsession. Every shaft, every bearing, every drop of oil forced to serve the altar of high-speed motion. But the price for that elegance is written in the torque curve. Turbines crave velocity. At low speed, all that power turns into hunger, steam vanishes, the boiler groans, and the S2 begins to devour herself from within. For a moment though, when all the numbers align, you feel like you have conquered friction itself. Crack open the gearbox and you find the true soul of the S2, a cathedral of gears, every tooth cut with the precision of a watchmaker, but scaled up to wrestle 6,900 horses at once. The turbine spins at 9,000 revolutions per minute, a mechanical banshee, but the wheels cannot match that frenzy. That is where an 18.5 to 1 reduction comes in. The turbine's wild speed is carved down, sliced and served to the axles at a few hundred revolutions per minute, enough to launch a 500-ton train down the main line without so much as a shudder. It is a marvel of mechanical translation, but also a razor's edge. The S2's gearbox is not a hammer, it is a scalpel, surgical, elegant, and utterly unforgiving if you ask it to do the wrong job. At high speed, the efficiency curve soars. 97% of the turbine's fury makes it to the rails. Above 40 miles per hour, she is nearly frictionless, the whole machine humming with rotary grace, but the fixed gear ratio is a trapdoor. Below 30 miles per hour, the turbine's appetite becomes monstrous. Steam vanishes, the boiler strains, and the whole system starts to eat itself alive. There is no backup generator, no electric motors to buffer the load like the C&O M1. It is direct drive or nothing. The S2's power is pure, but purity comes at a price. The gearbox cannot cheat physics, it can only obey. And if you try to force a scalpel to do a hammer's work, starting a heavy train, crawling through a yard, the S2's beautiful machinery turns against itself. That is the gamble we took, and the flaw we could not escape. Numbers don't lie, and the S2's numbers read like the logbook of a mad scientist let loose in a machine shop. On March 30th, 1945, the official dynamometer car was coupled behind number 6200. A 17-car consist stretching out behind her, every axle weighed down with expectation. The test orders were simple: run her flat out, measure everything, let the data settle the arguments. The turbine wound up past 8,000 revolutions per minute, gears meshing in oily perfection, and the speed recorder's needles swept past the 100 mark without a tremor. The chart paper from that run, Fort Wayne to Chicago, 48 kilometers of dead-level track, shows a clean, unwavering line at 110 miles per hour. Tractive effort was 70,500 pounds at peak, enough to make a triple-unit diesel sweat. Boiler pressure held at 310 pounds per square inch, every gauge pinned, every valve humming. There was no hammer blow, no piston thud, just a continuous surge, the kind of power that doesn't stutter. The crew in the dynamometer car watched the numbers roll in, each one a rebuke to the diesel crowd. For a moment, the S2 was not just a prototype. She was proof, stamped in ink and steel, that the old gods of steam could still outpace the new order, at least when the stopwatch was running and the rails were straight. Throttle wide open, the S2 leaves behind every notion of what a steam locomotive should feel like. There is no chug, no hammering of pistons, just an unbroken, rising scream, the turbine's voice climbing through the spectrum until it feels less like a train and more like a fighter jet at takeoff. The air in the cab vibrates with it, a high-pitched whine that drills straight into your skull. At 90 miles per hour, you can set a glass of water on the console and watch the surface barely ripple. No shaking, no lurching, just a sensation of gliding, as if the rails themselves have vanished beneath you. The crew calls it eerie. The ground blurs past, but the machine stays smooth, the only feedback a faint, steady pressure through the soles of your boots. The turbine's power comes on like a tidal wave, constant, unyielding, and almost silent except for that banshee howl. It is the sound of friction losing the fight, a mechanical purity that is equal parts terrifying and beautiful. For a brief stretch, you believe you have tamed the laws of motion. The numbers on the speed recorder climb, and the world outside dissolves into a smear of color and wind. But underneath the euphoria, the gauges twitch. The boiler strains, and the engineer's hand hovers over the throttle, knowing that this kind of perfection is paid for in hidden ways. The S2 is showing us what steam could be, if only it did not have to slow down. Drop the S2 below 30 miles an hour, and the whole boiler begins to sweat. The turbine, hungry for steam, demands a flood the firebox was never meant to deliver at a crawl. You watch the pressure gauge lurch and stagger 310 pounds per square inch one moment, then collapse to 85 in a single sickening trough. That is not a dip. That is a chasm. Every fireman in the cab feels it in his knuckles. The sudden silence as steam vanishes, the hissing roar as the blower kicks in, the frantic scramble to heap more coal onto the flames. But it is never enough. The turbine's appetite outpaces the firebox, and you are left with a boiler straining so hard it might as well be a submarine hull at crushed depth. The numbers on the dial do not just drop, they swing. Every time the throttle opens at low speed, the steam demand curve spikes like a heart attack, an instant need for thousands of pounds per hour. All of it ripped from the boiler in a single breath. The result is thermal shock, pure and simple. The firebox sheets, flat and wide in the bell pair style, try to flex and bow with each pressure swing, but they are locked in place by a forest of stay bolts, hundreds of steel rods meant to hold back the fury. When the pressure drops, those stays go from tension to slack and back again over and over until the steel cannot take it. One by one, they start to crack. There is no warning, just a sharp pop, sometimes barely audible over the turbine's whine, sometimes a gut-punching bang that echoes through the frame. A failed stay bolt means the firebox wall is no longer braced against 300 pounds of pressure pushing from inside. If enough go, the wall can buckle. In the slow motion hell of a pressure collapse, you can almost see the damage ripple outward. A spider web of fractures, hot gases leaking where steel should hold, the whole boiler threatening to tear itself apart from within. No piston engine ever did this. A hammer pounds in rhythm, giving the boiler time to breathe between strokes. The S2's turbine is a scalpel, precise, relentless, but merciless if you ask it to do a hammer's work. Below 30 miles an hour, you are not just fighting physics. You are fighting the limits of steel and steam, watching as the most advanced boiler on the rails eats itself alive in the name of progress. Reverse in a steam turbine is a riddle best left unsolved, but we tried anyway. The S2's forward turbine was a monster, 6,900 horsepower, 9,000 revolutions per minute, a force of nature that only cared about going fast and straight. But a railroad is not a test track. Sooner or later you have to stop, back up, or shuffle through a yard. That is where the experiment turns sour. You can't just spin a turbine backwards. The solution was to bolt on a second, much smaller turbine, one built for reverse, barely a quarter the size, rated at 1,500 horsepower, and only good for crawling at up to 22 miles per hour. On paper, it was enough to ease the S2 out of a siding or nudge her back onto the main. In practice, it was like asking a battleship to sidestep through a canal using a tugboat motor. The moment you called for power in reverse, the whole gearbox tensed up, every tooth bracing for the shock. The main turbine sat idle, cold and silent, while the little reverse unit howled and strained, feeding torque through the same reduction gears that had been designed for forward fury, not delicate backward motion. The shop log started to fill with warnings. Do not exceed the reverse cap. Do not force the throttle. Do not let the wheels slip. One careless move, one heavy-handed notch on the Johnson bar, and you could feel the gears protest. There were days when a misjudged shove in a yard would send a shudder through the frame. The sound of teeth grinding somewhere deep in the oil bath, and the foreman would curse under his breath. No catastrophic explosions, but enough close calls to make every mechanic jumpy. The S2 was a thoroughbred, not a switcher, and she hated being asked to tiptoe. Every trip through the shops was a litany of checks and prayers. The gearbox, that cathedral of steel, demanded constant attention. Oil levels, tooth wear, alignment checks, all logged and double-checked by men who knew that a single slip could mean days of downtime. The reverse turbine, underpowered and overtaxed, became a symbol of the whole project's fragility. Here was a machine born for the open mainline, forced to play at yard work it was never meant to do. The chief engineer watched the maintenance hours pile up, the mood in the shop souring from pride to resignation. We had built a weapon, not a workhorse, and every time the S2 limped out of the roundhouse, you could feel the experiment edging closer to its end. The last entry in the S2's maintenance log reads like a death sentence. By 1949, the cost sheets were a parade of red ink. Every trip to the shops meant another round of frantic repairs, another set of stay bolts replaced, another gearbox oil change that never seemed to stop the grinding. The accountants had run out of patience. The machine I once called a battleship on rails had become a hangar queen, too expensive to run, too strange to fix, and too proud to die quietly. Orders came down from the board. Dismantle number 6200. Scrap the experiment. No ceremony, no speeches, just a work order stamped with a date and a location. Conway Yard, Pennsylvania. I stood on the cinder path and watched the crews circle her, torches already hissing, as if they were preparing to take apart a crashed prototype in some secret hangar. The turbine, the heart of the whole mad project, was unbolted first, hoisted out like a relic from a lost civilization. Westinghouse wanted it back for study, a final insult to a machine that had promised so much. The rest was left to the scrappers, boiler, rods, wheels, all cut down to manageable pieces, their serial numbers logged in a ledger that would soon be forgotten. The numbers on the cost reports told the real story. Each mile chewed through more coal and water than any accountant could stomach. The gearbox, that cathedral of gears, needed constant attention, oil, alignment, new teeth cut for gears that should have lasted a decade. The firebox, battered by pressure swings, was now a patchwork of welds and replacement stays. Every shop visit ended with a new list of warnings, more parts on order, fewer mechanics willing to sign off on the repairs. The S2 was not just expensive, she was a mechanical obsession, eating the railroad alive from the inside. The day the last piece left Conway Yard, I ran my hand along the frame, cold, scored, and oil-soaked, the steel still humming with the memory of 9,000 revolutions per minute. It is a strange thing to see a machine so advanced, so beautiful in its fury, reduced to scrap by the very world it was built to save. We built the future, and it tore itself apart trying to be it. All that is left now are the numbers in a ledger and the echo of a turbine's whine, fading into the Pennsylvania dusk. In the age of smart grids and battery trains, the old turbine's howl still echoes, a reminder that pure mechanical ambition often burns too hot for reality to contain. Every engineer dreams of conquering friction, but S2's fate warns us, brilliance without restraint spins itself apart. The future still tempts us with impossible machines. The question is, will we build them or just dream in high revolutions per minute? Share your thoughts below.